Welcome, this is David, the Real Med White, and today I want to make a video on what is the smallest unit of society. And this is a debate that I was kind of interested in 4, 5, 6 years ago, back when I cared about politics, and now I don't. But it's still, I think, a very important question because it doesn't determine your worldview per se, but it does determine how you view in what way society should function. And this is, as I said, I think it's an important debate because it determines how we understand how society functions. But it also deals with how we view ourselves, how we view individuals, how we view our own families, how we view the political strata, how it's structured. And that is why I believe it's an important debate that we need to be taking a look at. So for the longest time, the kind of presupposition that a lot of people had in their minds is that they assumed, well, it seems like the family is the smallest unit of society because blah, 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 blah. And recently, for a couple of centuries, for the couple last centuries, the view has been shifted to the individual. So now a lot of people have the implicit understanding that it's the individual that's the smallest unit that makes up society. And depending on how you view these things, your view can be determined as liberal or individualistic or, conservative. Whatever conservative means. I'm not operating with, American political, American conservative. I'm not talking about that per se, but rather, just the names that we can all associate with. And to get into the debate, I'll start with the individualist argument simply because it's easy. It really sets the stage very well. And this is the most common individualist argument that I've heard. And on the surface, there is no problem with it. It seems very logical, seems very, doesn't seem to have any issues. The argument is basically this: if the smallest unit of society is the family, what is the family made out of, right? I mean, do the individuals in the family then not exist? Well, they exist, right? They surely do exist. And even the person that says the answer is the family will agree, right? A father does exist, son or daughter, right? The children exist, the mother exists, the grandmother exists, grandfather exists. Aren't these people individuals? So they do exist. So it seems very unlikely that the smallest unit of society is the family. And again, it seems like it makes a lot of sense. I think the assumption here, I think we need to kind of reframe the answer. The assumption here is basically, it seems to me at least, that the assumption is if something is made out of stuff, right? I mean, a nation is made out of things, like community made out of families, and the family is made out of individuals. Therefore, individual is the smallest unit of society. And the individual is kind of not made of things. That's kind of like the assumption that we're getting at. So I want to talk about the issues with the individualistic argument and why it doesn't actually work out as well. So when we speak of an individual, the first thing I want to note that a lot of people might miss is that the family is presupposed when speaking of an individual. And all I mean by that is, let's say, all of us are children of our parents. So the moment we speak of an individual, the parents are presupposed. So if you're a son or a daughter, your parents, your father and mother, are presupposed. Suddenly they are in the picture. If we're talking about a father, that father's children is presupposed. That father's wife is presupposed. And so you can't really separate the family from the individual, is what I'm getting at. And that is really the argument that I'm trying to go for, is that while the individual does really exist, it cannot be the smallest unit of society because the individual exists in the context of a family. Now you can say, doesn't this lead to this? You can make the same argument for the family in favor of community. Some people might make that argument. I will say, and I will bite the bullet and say, the families can exist outside of the context of community, of what's the bigger parts, right? We've had families that existed before nations were established, for example. We've had families that existed before communities, and whatever you mean by community is a different debate, I think, but communities were established. However, you could never have individuals before the family. And if you want to get into the hyper nitty gritty, you might maybe speculate. I think this will be very autistic, but you could say, oh, but in evolution, maybe there's just one blob that formed like. I don't take that argument seriously. I think really we have to I think the best, most logical assumption is that you can't separate the two. And that's the argument, really. You can't separate the individual from the family. And let me strengthen my argument by looking at it from the other direction. Let me assume the premises of the individualist, right? Let's say that the individuals, or the collection of individuals, make up a family, right? So the family is composed of these individuals. That's what most likely they will say. Number one question, for example, let's say your father died. Does that mean that your family is like not a family anymore? Or is it 2/3 of a family? Maybe 1/3 of a family now? Maybe, or another argument in a different direction. Let's say you have a child in a family, father and mother. That comprises a complete family. And everyone's like 33% of the family, let's say. What happens when another child is born? Do you have a brother? So does that mean that the family is now like 133%, or did everyone suddenly get decreased in their family points? Like, how does it exactly function? When you think about it this way, it really doesn't make any sense. And I'll talk about the alternative view of what I'm going to be proposing. But another argument, this is not something I'm fully 100% adamant on, but it's something I believe we should think about. And that is, if the family is not the smallest unit because it's composed of individuals, shouldn't we therefore say that the smallest unit of society isn't the individual, because the individual is also composed of things? The individual isn't simple, it's made out of parts. So the family is not the smallest unit of society because it is made out of parts. The same argument can apply for the individual, right? You can say, oh, the individual is composed of a body and a soul. Or maybe you don't believe in the soul. You're going to say, oh, it's composed out of just body parts and whatever. Whatever view you want to try to go for, eventually, if you want to be consistent, if you want to be logically consistent, I think if you want to be logically consistent, you're going to have to say the smallest unit of society is the atom. But at that point, you're just having a stupid argument at this stage. And now you can qualify it, and that's why I'm not fully adamant. You can qualify and say, oh, there's, society, the individual, we're talking about in the context of those who possess a mind, for example. But I think if you also add those qualifications, it's kind of like you're kind of changing the goalpost in your favor. But as I said, I think it's something definitely to think about. So now, how do we view the family? I will say a good view, for example, again, I mean, if your parents die, do you lose? Does the family lose its parts and become not family? I don't think so. I believe family exists fully. It's something that exists fully in each individual. So if you're part of family X, your father and mother are part of family X, even if they die, the family X still lives on with you, right? That's how inheritance works, right? And so this is, again, once you think about it, it's really not illogical. It's something that we all assumed how it functions. That's how you have inheritance, again, in the first place. And I will even also like to add, kind of shortly, is that when you think about like marriage, right? And in the political implications, when you think about marriage, right? Marriage is two flesh becoming one. I'm taking the more Christian example, but I'm a Christian, so I'm going to take that Christian example. When the two become one, it's not just the individuals that become one, but it's also the family that also becomes one, right? So now your wife's family is part of your family now. Even if you're not genetically related, it's still part of your family. Your children is your children going to be part of two different families now? Or is your children going to be part of one family? Come on, from that direction. And so it's not like you're made out of like 5, 6 different, you're like simultaneously a member of 5, 6 different families. It's really the same, the two families become one in that sense. That doesn't mean that the families are not distinct, rather that they're also joined in this unity. That's all I'm saying. So there's still distinctions between families. I mean, mother's family is distinct from my dad's family, but they still have become one because of this marriage. And when they pass on, they're going to be one. They're going to be united. As far as I'm concerned, for example. And what are the political implications of this? Well, the political implications are not really difficult to see. The policies now have to be, in accordance to this, the policies end up being centered on the family. Now, individuals are being seen in the context of the family rather than an atomic individual. And this is a rejection of atomic individualism, meaning that each person is not their own king, but they're part of a web of connections, real web of connections, not a what a sociologist will say as a web of connections, something like just a term, and merely a term, a nominal term, but a real web of connections, an actual connection that you have with other people that you cannot be separated from. You cannot be separated from your father, even if you leave your house. You can never be separated from that context. Never. That is impossible, because your existence comes from that. Your existence comes from that reality. And marriage then becomes the foundation of society, naturally, because it is where families are born. It is where families are created and made. And marriage becomes the fundamental. And so marriage suddenly becomes important. It's not something that we think about when we're 28. It's not a status thing anymore, right? That's what we're taught. That's what we're taught of in the televisions or whatever. We thought of, you're supposed to accomplish stuff. And then, the marriage is something you're going to do because you don't want to be alone, but it's a plan B. It's just something you want to do. It's something that, it just happens to work. That's not how it should be seen in this context. And if you notice, my argument is not that it is something that works. I think it does work way better. But it's not that the argument is not that it works. The argument is that this is the only logical way that things as it is are possible. That is my argument. That's the argument that I'm trying to make. Not that it pragmatically works, because I think that's a different debate. It's an angle you can take, but I think that's a different debate. And small questions like these can be very fundamental, again, as I said in the beginning, on how we understand or how we believe society should function. And we're seeing the results of the understanding of what happens when you say the individual is the smallest unit. Well, what happens is the complete destruction of society, fundamentally speaking. And I'm not speaking in the sense of, really it breaks down. It still operates somewhat, but it's broken to its core. It's something that doesn't hold up together anymore. It's being severed. And a lot of people, especially I've seen this trend, if you talk to like unhappy people, right? A lot of them will point out, a lot of people these days will point out that their family failed them, that my family failed me. My family, I didn't have a good family. And the reason why is that societies that we live in have been structured around this question, and they have presupposed the answer that the smallest unit is the individual. Because the things are structured this way, you can't really blame the fans, because policies, the whole thing is structured on this basis. And so the best answers for family members just end up still being bad answers, because it's just how things are structured. And if you look into it more in detail, for example, in governmental policies, this is something you will see. I made a video on this, on how welfare is destructive. And it's not because of capitalism or whatever, or like libertarian talking points, but it talks about something even deeper than that. And that's what I'm trying to go for. It's an old video of mine that I made, so you can go watch that. And yeah, so that's all I wanted to talk about. Really, I have nothing else to add. Thank you all for watching this. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe. Occasionally I'll make videos like this, but as you know me, I just mostly do theology, because that's where my brain works most. Things like this, my brain doesn't work as well. But again, thank you all for watching this. If you like this, click like and share this to your friends, to your homeboys. And that's all. So I'll see you guys in the next video. God be with you all.